So in 1879, on the 17th of September, Eugène VIOLLET Le Duc died. He's been, mostly known as VIOLLET Le Duc. He had actually two other names. Another name besides Eugène. So Eugène Emmanuel VIOLLET Le Duc, as you see, he was born in January 1814 and died in September 1879, was a French architect and author who restored many prominent medieval landmarks in France, including those which had been damaged or abandoned during the French Revolution. His major restoration projects included Notre Dame de Paris, the Basilica of Saint-Denis, also in Paris, Mont Saint-Michel, Saint-Chapelle, and the medieval walls of the city of Carcassonne. And he planned much of the physical construction of the Statue of Liberty in New York. Well, here it is not mentioned that he also did important work for the Cathedral of Amiens, also in France, the tallest Gothic cathedral and the largest in France. His later writings on the relationship between form and function in architecture had a notable influence on a new generation of architects, including Victor Horta, Hector Guimard, Anthony Gaudí, Hendrik Petrus Berlage, Louis Sullivan, and Frank Lloyd Wright, an incredible group of people who had been influenced by VIOLLET Le Duc. Again, Victor Horta, Hector Guimard, Anthony Gaudí, Hendrik Petrus Berlage, Louis Sullivan, and Frank Lloyd Wright. In fact, Frank Lloyd Wright recommended to his own son, David, who also became an architect, to only read one book. And that book was by VIOLLET Le Duc, le dictionnaire encyclopédique, l'encyclopédie de l'architecture médiévale, the encyclopedia of the medieval architecture, or dictionnaire raisonné de l'architecture médiévale, as it is also called. So this was the man, not yet his face. I like to begin with fragments of the portrait sometimes. Again, a very inspiring figure. He was a rebellious architect. He refused to start an architecture school like l'École des Beaux-Arts. He preferred instead to start working in an architecture office, so he never had a formal training. This is very typical of some of the best architects in the world, both in the more recent past and also in modernity. Why was he so rebellious in this sense? Usually you don't think about an architect who works as a restorer to have this non-conformism. But as I said, he was very creative, and he also took sometimes a lot of freedom in interpreting, all the works, and his interventions had been accused by some that he took too much freedom, too much liberty in his restorative work. But I think any work which deserves to be called creative has to be like this. You cannot just restore a building as it was once. I don't agree with that. You have to assert also your own time. You cannot mimic what happened in another century. That's not what nature does. Nature doesn't repeat itself. What it did in the 19th century, nature doesn't repeat in the 20th. And human beings shouldn't do that either. That's why I think the word restoration, in my opinion, should be changed. And the new word would be instauration, to install. You install something, meaning you are giving birth to something that is new, but is related to the past, is connected with the past, but is not mimicking the past. Any creative work cannot be placid, cannot be, just bowing your head and following, you know, the traces in sand that other people traced. So VIOLLET LE DUC deserve his fame, and I'm not sure he deserves the criticism that came towards him. This is an image with his head, his portrait sculpted in the Cathedral of Amiens in France. It's part of the building, so to speak. This is also, you even see his signature here, his you know, cryptic signature. And I wonder why architects don't do this these days. I mean, I'm not trying to encourage egocentrism or narcissism, but I think it's important for a building to narrate something, to tell a story, and you know, maybe discreetly somewhere, a profile of the author could be incised in the wall, or who knows in what manner. Anyway, it's just a thought. Some drawings by VIOLLET LE DUC. He drew unbelievably, and there is an immense amount of drawings by him that were published in his encyclopedias, not just the Encyclopedia of Medieval Architecture, but also the Encyclopedia of Medieval Furnishings. And it's not just about architecture and furnishings. He draws everything: costumes, animals, everything. He draws life. This is what he draws. He was an architect of life. That's why Frank Lloyd Wright recommended only one book to his own son, and that was the book about architecture. But again, I have that book. It's the Bible of architecture in a way. It draws everything, not just the buildings and structures and even ornaments, but many other things relating to life itself. So here I just show some, I forgot to say that he was influenced by Henri Labrouste, a very important French architect who was about 13 years older than him. And here you can see a little bit of his influence. Maybe I'll also show, because I have a presentation on Henri Labrouste. We'll see how it goes, and I could show some of his works as well. So again, VIOLLET LE DUC didn't go to an architecture school, although the French had a very prestigious one, l'École des Beaux-Arts. He refused. He wanted to learn architecture by himself, just like Tadao Ando in a way. So he did it, and he did it brilliantly. But he had mentors. He had architects who influenced him, like Henri Labrouste. So, you know, most of the drawings that are present in his books were drawn by him and then incised, engraved by, you know, professional engravers. So, you know, we are dealing with a major force in architecture here, who didn't just build, although he even built, you know, on his own, not just restorative work. And we are going to see some buildings built by VIOLLET LE DUC, but also he was very, very, you know, present in the restorative work of the great medieval buildings of France. He loved the Gothic. He loved the Gothic art, the Gothic architecture, and he was not the only one. In the 19th century, not just in France, in Great Britain as well, there was a great neo-Gothic movement, but he resisted. Please be kind and turn off the microphone. Thank you. His work cannot be described as neo-Gothic. He himself would not have liked to be called a neo-Gothic architecture, but he loved Gothic architecture. And I'm not blaming him. I think Gothic architecture is splendid. And those who are only obsessed by the Renaissance and post-Renaissance architecture should have a second look at the great Gothic buildings, not just cathedrals, but also towns, cities. Medieval urbanism, I think, is very romantic and very picturesque. Even today, if we go to certain countries and we visit old cities, the medieval cities stand out because of the romantic streets, sinuous streets, and buildings which are not obsessed with symmetry and you know, an artificiality usually connected with you know, so-called classical and neoclassical. You see, he even drew here a snake. You wonder why. And anyway, this was a very complex man, and with even contradictions. Like, for example, he's known for advocating the honest expression of structure, but he also was very fond of ornaments. And there are beautiful ornaments that he drew and built, just like Louis Sullivan, the father of the modern office building or the tower, the office tall building, and you know, the author of that famous phrase, form follows function, which was seriously misinterpreted by many. So you can see he didn't just draw buildings, he drew everything, you know, domestic objects. You know, here we have a building, but he also drew details of, you know, construction entities, constructive entities. This man identified himself, I would say, with the life of architecture, or with the architecture of life. Look, he even drew this, and this is his signature. And you wonder, you know, why? What is the relevance of this to architecture? Well, I think the relevance is the relevance of life in its totality to architecture. Architecture is not just a separated domain from life. No, it's connected with everything, and ideally it expresses everything. Furniture, also designed by VIOLLET LE DUC, or he made, you know, representations of all the pieces of furniture. He was incessantly drawing, inventing, truly an encyclopedist in the field of architecture. Even war machines like this one. I mean, just look at the intricacy of this mechanism. You know, and this was a man who also built a lot. So you wonder, how come he had time? Well, he made time. He made time for what he loved. Here we see, you know, this short, small kaleidoscopic you know, image of some of his works. We see Notre Dame de Paris, which was affected by fire, as you know, recently. We see Saint Denis, also in Paris. Then this is a castle, and then this another large work done by him. And in this work, I do not actually, it's in VIOLLET, yes, I couldn't see it very well. I visited it, and anyway, we'll arrive at it, and we are going to talk in detail about it. So as an architectural restorer, he was a pupil of Achille Lessière. I don't know who he was, but was inspired in his career by the architect Henri Labrouste, which I already mentioned. In 1836, he traveled to Italy, where he spent 16 months studying architecture. Back in France, he was drawn irrevocably to Gothic art. Then he worked together with this person, Lassus, who apparently trained him as an archaeologist, working together with him. And he did restorations for these. Here I mentioned just a few, well, important works by him, but these are not the only ones. This Vézelay Abbey is a very important work, and so is the one at Autun, which is very close to it, and you will see why. Then Holy Chapel, or chapel in Paris, Notre Dame, City Wall of Carcassonne, Pierrefonds Castle, but he built others. Anyway, this is interesting, you know, talking about the restorations. Frequently, he combined historical fact with creative modification. And I think he chose the right path, because you cannot just, as I mentioned before, you cannot just, neglect the time you are in. You are supposed to assert your own life and the time you are in. So he said, to restore an edifice, he observed in the Dictionnaire raisonné, is not to maintain it, repair or rebuild it, but to re-establish it in a complete state that may never have existed at a particular moment. Interesting and rather unconventional. So he was not advocating, repairing, rebuilding it exactly as we think the building was at its very beginning. No, he wanted to create a new whole that asserted also the time he was in. Now, the Basilica Maria Magdalena in Vézelay is called Maria Magdalena because the bones apparently of Maria Magdalena are there at Vézelay, which is a beautiful old cathedral or basilica that originated in the Romanic time. So it was prior to Gothic. So during the French Revolution, the ancient monastery buildings were destroyed and sold at auction. Only the basilica, cloister, and dormitory escaped demolition. After the revolution, Vézelay stood in danger of collapse. The church was in a sorry state, as shown in a watercolor by VIOLLET LE DUC to the right, who was integral to the design of architectural practice. Arches, chapped, cracked walls, turn left west facade collapsed. Immediately began the restoration project, extends until, this is probably translated from a different language. The English is not excellent. Anyway, so he began the restoration in 1855. And this is how the building looks like now, but we are going to see other pictures. He rebuilt much of the building, especially the flying buttresses and arches, and restored the west facade and the choir. The west front, which is this one, the entrance into the basilica, a combination of Romanesque, Gothic, and 19th century work. In other words, his own work in the 19th century, originally built around 1150 in the Romanesque style. It was given a Gothic central gable and south tower in the 13th century. Much of this was heavily restored in 1840 by VIOLLET LE DUC, who also added a Romanesque style tympanum of the Last Judgment to the central portal. Well, here we read that he worked in 1840s, but before that he started the work later, 1850 something. Anyway, this is the watercolor that he did with the facade of the building. And this is what it is. You see on the right, restored by him. And I had been there, and I have to say, it's a very moving experience. It's hard not to be moved by, the prestige of the passing time, in a way, because there are parts that are from the 12th century. And I think VIOLLET LE DUC did a good job at preserving the building and also underlining its dignity. There are great sculptures, like you see here. Now, who was the sculptor who did this? I do not know, and I think no one knows, but not far away from Vézelay, there is another church, Autun. At Autun, it's known the name of the sculptor who, this was influenced by the sculptor in Autun. His name was Gislibertus, and is one of the few craftsmen, artists, architects whose names came down to us from from such an old time in the past. They are unbelievable, but these are also equally unbelievable. And you see the presence of hell, the presence of Satan, of the devil, you know, something that in today's churches we stay away from. And VIOLLET LE DUC actually brought to Notre Dame de Paris, the great cathedral in Paris, gargoyles, very creative, and they are actually called grotesques because they bring to imagination formal representations of, well, we have to say, in a way, hell, you know, beasts. And you wonder why he did that, but we'll arrive there. We'll see. I have a special chapter in this presentation dedicated to the gargoyles of VIOLLET LE DUC at Notre Dame de Paris. But again, I would not forget these dark, you know, presences in the architecture of VIOLLET, because I think they say something about the complexity of the ancients, of the, you know, the initial builders of this great building. They acknowledge the duality of life. They acknowledge that there was a paradise and there was a hell. They acknowledge the apocalypse, and they acknowledge the beast within life and within the human beings. So here we see usually in such a representation, on one hand you have paradise, and on the other hand you have hell. That's probably what is, I can see very well these small things, but it's possible that the representation didn't avoid the duality that, you know, paradise and hell invoked. Well, in those times, there was faith. They erected unbelievable cathedrals like the one in Amiens or Chartres Cathedral or the one in Reims, that were the houses of God, and people meant it. They didn't live for themselves. In a way, they lived for erecting the cathedral. And, you know, it shows. You know, 800 years later, 700 years later, 900 years later, these buildings still stand up. Now, this was restored heavily in the 19th century, but others still has elements from the 12th century. And you feel it when you are there, you feel it, despite the presence of the cars, which wake you up, so to speak. You feel it when you are in the proximity of the building. You feel that you are dealing with a building that saw many things, because many centuries passed over it. So this is the Basilica in VIOLLET. Now we look at Sainte-Chapelle in Paris. This is a drawing published by VIOLLET LE DUC. And I mean, really, it's incredible how he was able to draw so much. You know, and these were manual drawings. He didn't have the technologies we have. Now, this drawing was not his. This is later, in my opinion, or it's during his time. I'm a little bit, I don't think it is his drawing, but it doesn't matter. This is Sainte-Chapelle in Paris, and here you see images from the built work. I mean, just imagine these windows, you know, stained glass windows. In itself is a symphony, it's a symphonic work, just one window. You know, by comparison, our windows are so banal. Of course, we don't build cathedrals, we don't build chapels, we don't, but I still think maybe our buildings, even the domestic buildings, should narrate something, should tell a story, and maybe windows could receive some creativity and some imagination from us. Look at the top. Look at the gargoyles. Look at the complexity of everything here. You know, it's very, I think uplifting and inspiring. Now, it's also interesting that Frank Lloyd Wright, who didn't like the Renaissance, and he actually wrote against the Renaissance because he thought that a true culture and a true architecture should be a naissance, a birth, not a rebirth. But he liked Viollet le Duc, and through implication, I would say he loved the Gothic. Although I never read this by him, but if he liked le dictionnaire raisonné de l'architecture of Viollet le Duc, or the encyclopedia of medieval architecture that Viollet le Duc published, I imagine he was fascinated himself by medieval architecture. And who wouldn't be, really? In some respects, I mean, it is in a way surprising that many think that somehow the history of architecture started in the Renaissance or with the Greeks, but they jump over both the Romanic and the Gothic architecture, and I think it's a great, it's a grave omission. Anyway, Saint-Chapelle, Paris. It's still, I would say, an elegant building, although maybe the word elegant should not be applied to a sacred building, but it does have elegance, it's true. It's not a very large building, and it's possible that actually he built the spire, because the spire seems to be newer and a lot of metal work, and it's similar somehow with the one on Notre Dame in Paris, which fell, you know, when the fire broke out. Notre Dame de Paris. So we arrived at the great cathedral in Paris. This was built by him. And I have been there, and I have to say, I always like Notre Dame de Paris more from the back, meaning from l'abside, from the east, not from the west, where the entrance is. Because in my opinion, the Cathedral of Notre Dame was too heavily, if I can say so, too heavily cleaned up. It was too cleaned up, and it looks suspiciously clean and whitish, but from the back, it had more authenticity. And this spire by Viollet le Duc, I admired. So here we see the River Seine, and you know, this is an old image, but Viollet le Duc even depicted himself as one of the saints or prophets here. We are going to see the sculpture, the statue representing the architect himself. So this is the great spire, very slender. Yes, it was affected terribly by, it fell when it was the big tragedy with the fire not too long ago. Anyway, what do you see here? It's the T-square, or the drafting instrument of the architect. Maybe it's not quite a T-square, but moving in that direction. This is the hand of Viollet le Duc. I mean, you know, a statue, of course. And we are going to see more, another picture of this at least. This is a drawing of the spire that was built on top of the roof at Notre Dame. This is a picture of the building without the spire that Viollet le Duc built, but seen from the east, southeast. I don't know what you think, and I don't know what your religion is, but you know, when I see this kind of architecture where you see almost the whole of nature and the whole of the human universe, and it's this quest for totality, and it's this wandering, this this great emotion and aware that the builders had erecting the building. You know, I mean, look at these animals here. You would say, who sees them? Well, maybe the gods see them, or God. I don't know, but it's clearly a dialogue between the earth and the sky, between human life and what might be above. Something we don't even think about these days. We think we are at the center of the universe and we are the only ones that matter, and that's it. Well, that's not how other people thought in other centuries. Here is Viollet le Duc. Well, you know, he placed himself in a special position. Here he is, the architect, the builder in the 19th century who continued the work, of course, and who built the spire. Look at the gargoyle. I think it's magnificent. You know, it's why he brought to Notre Dame this gargoyle and not this one. We are going to see some others. Is he looking down on the life of the people, you know, around the great river? And I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm nostalgic, but I wish. Here he is. Here he is. Hello, Monsieur le Duc. We are sorry you died 142 years ago, but you left something behind, obviously. Yes, again, him on the roof of Notre Dame, and I hope he will be brought back. I'm going to show also a few projects proposed for, you know, the rebuilding of the roof of Notre Dame. I'm sure they will bring back these statues that were affected by the fire. L'Abside de Notre Dame, Charles Mérion. This is an engraving by an important engraver of the 19th century, L'Abside de Notre Dame. And here it is. It was done in the 19th century, and you can see it doesn't have the spire. It was done before Viollet le Duc built the spire. At that time, there were no cars, just carriages and horses, animals, and so on. Anyway, moving forward. New projects for the spire and roof of Notre Dame. I'll show a few of the proposals that were made after the fire affected seriously the cathedral. So, you know, most of the drama happened here. I mean, the whole cathedral suffered, but here in a very severe and obvious way, because the roof and the spire collapsed. Viollet le Duc's spire. The statues, it seems, were removed before fire because there was work being done at that time on the roof. And anyway, they will restore it. You see an image of the cathedral after the fire. But I have to say, some years ago, I think, well, in 2013, if I'm not wrong, when there were 850 years since the construction for Notre Dame started, I wanted to launch a competition, and I wrote the text, and I even sent it to some people, and I even received a project or two, which probably would surprise you. I proposed to build another building in front of Notre Dame de Paris, because besides Notre Dame, or Notre Dame, meaning Jesus' mother, Christ's mother, Maria, there was another important woman in Paris, in France, and that is Marie-Anne, or Marianne, who led the revolutionaries that tear down the Bastille. And she is represented in a famous painting by Delacroix. So she represents not the sacred woman, not the mother of Jesus, but the mother of the revolution, so-called mother, the symbolic, the metaphorical mother of the soul of the revolution that brought or wanted to bring to the world égalité, fraternité, liberté. So I thought it would be very interesting to have two women face to face. Here is point zero, no, here, because this is the Western facade. Here is point zero in Paris, meaning the point from which all distances in Paris are measured. So across this small square, I asked for proposals to build a building for Marianne. This would be for Marie, Mother of Christ, and that one, Marianne. So two women facing each other. In other words, the secular or the profane facing the sacred. Two women in Paris, in the center of Paris. Because I think, you know, we cannot rely here on earth just on honoring the sacred. It's not enough. Like Fernando Pessoa, the great Portuguese poet, said, we need God and aspirins. I'm not saying that Marianne would have provided us with aspirins, but she fought for liberté, égalité, fraternité. Thus, I think human life as a connection with the above and the below, with the divinity, but also has its own troubles, its own problems, its social and political and economical and ethical problems, which the divinity doesn't seem to care too much about. So we have to care about. Anyway, it was an idea. I wrote the text. Who is interested to read it can read it. And I received one or two projects, but I didn't launch it. You know, I didn't send the invitation to too many people. This is a proposal for the new roof of the cathedral and a new spire inspired by the one by VIOLLET LE DUC, but I'm not sure is convincing. I mean, let's say maybe the roof might be this way, but why should the spire mimic the same ornamentation as the roof? Is something dubious here. Another proposal, some people imagine some kind of ecological lamp there at the top, or even this one. In my opinion, I didn't yet see a proposal that was truly convincing. And we are going to see one by Sir Norman Foster and one by Massimiliano Fuxas. You see, you know, an so-called eco lab or eco gallery or eco whatever. But the truth is, whoever designed this neglected that under this huge glass surface, you melt in the summer and you freeze in the winter. And why should we incarcerate the plants underneath glass roof? But again, you know, we are dealing here with Its Majesty, the human being, who thinks that the whole world was made for the human beings, and then we are supposed to do whatever we want with trees, plants, animals, and so on. It's very egocentric and very naive. But this is what it is. I mean, you know, anyway, you see, there are various proposals kind of similar, you know, invade the cathedral in a way at the top with, you know, tourists and visitors and so on, who would climb even on the shoulders, even on the nose of God, because this is how human beings are, you know. They think that they are entitled. And I don't think so. Look at this, you know, this is also kind of ridiculous. You know, you propose this melodramatic, artificially sculpted so-called fire. I really think, I didn't see, even from major architects, I didn't see one single proposal which would truly make sense. And I'm not saying that the problem is easy. It's not. It's a difficult problem. How can you do what VIOLLET LE DUC would have done? That is to assert reverence for the old building, but also to create something that is not insulting the old building, but is testifying about the time when it is built. here is again, you know, this kind of techno exaltation, you know. I don't know. I mean, it can be done. Maybe this is not so bad compared, but it's still, you know, kind of arrogantly going so tall, you know, as if again, God is the human being. And we know very well that this is not the case. Here is another one, you know, in my opinion, not very convincing. Anyway, or look, a swimming pool on top of the cathedral. Well, I don't think VIOLLET LE DUC would have been amused, and not just him. It's again the impertinence of the human being who thinks that everything belongs to him, and he can do whatever he wants. He can place, you know, he can make a, you know, some kind of, I don't know the word in English, you know, that sloping thing in the amusement parks of children on the nose of God. Human beings would do anything because they think they are entitled, you know. What an, I mean, really, it infuriates me because, you know, they can do swimming pools in many other places, you know. Why would they do it on top of the cathedral? You know, this again, it shows the impertinence of a human being who is unable to know his limits. You know, I mean, I'm recalling also that Leon Krier, a very important postmodern architect, proposed a swimming pool, a triangular, huge swimming pool in front of St. Peter, you know, in Rome. Sir Norman Foster, he made a proposal too. I think, I mean, you know, Foster, more, you know, discreet in a way architect, but not totally. I mean, you know, of course he had to make a viewing platform, you know, because we have to have a human viewing platform from where we take pictures with our incessantly used cameras, even from the top of Notre Dame Cathedral. It has to be done, of course. A new spire made from crystal, glass, and stainless steel. Of course, it has to be glass and steel. Glass roof would allow natural light to illuminate the space below. How banal. I mean, we just saw before 2 or 3, you know, schemes very similar. Again, you know, this is not about sending, I don't know exactly how to put it. This is again a man-centered world, not a God-centered world, a man-centered world. So we make it of glass, so light could reach us, me, and me again, the egocentric human being at the top of the house of God, because this is what the cathedral is supposed to mean, is the house of God. It's not the house of man, Monsieur Sir Norman Foster. I'm very sorry. But what can we do? This is the time we live in, when we think that we can climb, as I, you know, improvised earlier, on the nose of God himself. Now, Studio Massimiliano Fuxas, an important studio and an important architect, he proposed this. This is Mr. Fuxas, and he works together with his wife, and they build a lot and sometimes interesting buildings. This is what he proposed. Well, you know, not very different from what we saw earlier. Again, in my opinion, the problem indeed is difficult. How to do a significant work here, which is also not arrogant, which is not insulting the cathedral, but which also asserts our modernity, our time, the time we live in. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I didn't yet see a proposal which would ask intensely, build me. Now, the Basilica of Saint Denis, the west facade in Paris was also done by VIOLLET LE DUC, and this is a very, apparently the Gothic, as a movement, as an artistic, architectural movement, started with this basilica in the 12th century. And VIOLLET LE DUC restored the facade and probably did some other works within the basilica. I so regret I went with some students there some 2-3 years ago, 3-4 years ago, and we live just 10 minutes away from this very important work. There are the kings of France buried there, and we didn't know. I didn't know, so we never visited it. But anyway, better later than never. So this is Saint Denis, that has the reputation that the Gothic, in its cultured and in a way official way, started here with this building. And then in the 19th century, VIOLLET LE DUC contributed to its restoration, and to he restored the western facade, which probably was meant to have 2 towers, but for some reason, they managed to build only one. I love the Gothic, and I love these old buildings, where the stone is not white. And I don't believe Le Corbusier was right when he imagined that at one time, a long time ago, the cathedrals were white. Les cathédrales étaient blanches. I don't think the cathedrals were ever white, because after all, stone very rarely is white. It's rather gray, like here. And it was the excessive purism or I don't know how to call it, of Le Corbusier, that imagined that at the beginning the cathedrals were white. No, I don't think they were ever white, and they didn't need to be white. Well, here you see a drawing with an idealized version of the western facade with 2 towers. Well, this one was never built. And now here he is again, the architect. And this, I don't know who did this. Did it himself. He did it. It looks somehow a watercolor done by him. I think this man was, like other important artists, kind of in love with himself, if he represented himself a few times. Some important artists did so, like Dürer or Rembrandt. They made countless self-portraits, but not so many architects. Anyway, this is the building with 2 towers, and this is how he made it. I mean, this he restored. He didn't build this tower himself. Now, Mont Saint-Michel. We all know pictures of this. I don't know exactly what he did at Mont Saint-Michel, but I was there. This is the problem when you have works of such vast dimensions and complexities. Unless you are an expert in the work of someone, you don't know exactly what and where VIOLLET LE DUC worked. He did a lot of restorative work for many places in France. Here he is again. Sorry for that watercolor. That's him. And this is Mont Saint-Michel, a truly beautiful destination in France. Carcassonne. In Carcassonne also, he did work. I don't know. He restored some of the walls. I don't know exactly what he did, but this is a complex of buildings where he also worked, and you are going to see others. France is indeed very rich in all kinds of old buildings that we don't even know of. Carcassonne is a well-known citadel, but there are others which are much less known. He loved the past. He loved the Gothic. He had a romantic disposition towards. He didn't like, from what I read, he didn't like to build his own work, so to speak. And we are going to see 3 apartment buildings he built in Paris and a few other works. But I guess he liked to connect with a building that already existed and which was built at a different time. Somehow, in connection with this, I remember that the great Mexican architect Luis Barragan, he was asked at one moment to build something in Houston, Texas. And after some reflection and maybe even some study, he refused the commission. He said, I have nothing to start from. So Luis Barragan, a modern architect, he still wanted to have something to start from. And I remember in the great ballad of Master Manole in the Romanian folklore, Master Manole doesn't start to build his church anywhere. In fact, he was searching for a place where to start building the church, and he decided to start building it where there was a ruin and where a dog was barking. It was there that he told his workers, here we build the church. And this is very interesting because just like Viollet le Duc and just like Luis Barragan, the popular imagination had it right in the sense that they invested Manole with this wisdom that in order to make a work which is significant and it connects on the spiral of time with other times, you have to build in a place where you have something to start from. And maybe that's why Viollet le Duc was not so interested to build for himself and by himself. He wanted to build, to contribute to buildings that already existed. It's a thought I had. I don't know, of course, the reasons he preferred to work in what is called restorations. Because we already know he was not a placid spirit. He was not, he was a creative force and he wanted to assert himself, but not starting from tabula rasa. So I don't know what he did here, but he worked here, and is one of his most important contributions to restorations. La Cité de Carcassonne, the city of Carcassonne, which is a citadel. And by the way, of citadels, I'm preparing now a PowerPoint presentation exactly about citadels, because I think citadels could offer an alternative to our never-ending, open urbanism. A citadel has virtues. We might not agree with these virtues because we think we have the freedom to expand and expand through suburbs forever and ever and ever. But I think citadels have very interesting potential for architecture and beyond it, social life. Anyway, some drawings engraved. He also, apparently, Viollet le Duc was involved with the military. He made studies and even of strategies, military strategies. So he was involved. Here you see it explicitly, but the tools of war are rather those of the Middle Ages. I mean, these things would be totally irrelevant in the atomic age. Anyway. So here it is, Carcassonne, where Viollet le Duc contributed. I don't know exactly what he did, but it doesn't matter almost, even if his name disappeared, this is beyond individual names. La Cathédrale de Clermont-Ferrand, here he also did some works. I also don't know exactly what, but again, what matters is that he contributed to saving these buildings and improving them, and sometimes adding creative new elements. These cathedrals are truly very beautiful. I don't know what you think about the Gothic, but I admire it. Maybe because also I grew up in Sibiu, a town which has a medieval side, and I know what it means to be in the shadow of an old cathedral or church. It's very inspiring, and if you have a romantic disposition, you connect with the cathedral. The cathedral is offering you a center, physical and metaphysical, even if it is black, like in this picture, or dark. Église Saint-Nicolas de Münster in Münster, another church for which he worked. Cathedral Notre-Dame de Lausanne. He actually died, I think, in Lausanne. He didn't die in France 142 years ago. These are his watercolors with the cathedral in Lausanne. And here there are some pictures of that cathedral. It looks somehow a little bit less French and a little more Swiss somehow, being so clean and ordered and so on. Basilique Saint-Sernin de Toulouse, different kind of religious building. I mean, with one tower, but look at it. It's quite quite impressive. So I don't want to be misunderstood. He didn't build these cathedrals. He just did work restoring things that needed to be restored, and at times inventing some things that irritated later critics and theoreticians and architects and so on. Because yes, the one who thinks differently by himself, as Viollet le Duc was, does irritate those who are less creative. Anyway, so this is in Toulouse. Now I'll show you 3 secular buildings, meaning 3 profane buildings, and I'll show you the building where he lived in Paris. The apartment building 68 Rue Condorcet in Paris. I think that's the one, yes. L'architecte Eugène Viollet le Duc a construit cette maison he built this house in 1862, and he lived there until the end of his life. So he lived in this building, which he built in 1862. So he was 48 years old when he built this building. I am myself a little bit surprised to see, this kind of architecture from someone who was so much in love with the Gothic. But, this was not the house of God. It was an apartment building in Paris. You know where he lived? Here. And here there is something on this column. It's the only one that has this. This identifies his apartment. Now, I don't know how many windows, maybe the whole floor was his. I don't know, but that's where he lived. And I hope I have a detail. It's here. You see, no other window has this. And we remember the head in the Cathedral of Amiens, his own head. So I guess this was some kind of a, idol, if I want to say, or some kind of a effigy, an animal, something to protect his, his place. Here it is. You see a little better. So that's where Viollet le Duc lived and worked. Here it is. Is it an owl? Maybe. The owl symbolizes wisdom. I think there are suggestions here, even for the present, to try to tell a story, discreetly, it might not be for anyone to see, something which identifies the building with your presence there, and it can be, metaphorical, symbolical, it can be hidden from the street, it can be hidden, it can be done in such a way that it's just you that knows about it and the gods above. It's possible. Here it is. Maybe this is his own spirit in a way, the spirit of Viollet le Duc in a physical form. And now we see it's probably some kind of a museum there now with his own apartment. Some of the furniture he had, I guess, and some models or something there. Now another building on Rue Chauchat. I guess there are two. I see two addresses. Anyway, another apartment building is this one in a more, in the corner. He built it in the 19th century, and another one, Inscrit à l'inventaire here. This building is considered a historical monument. He built it in 1860. No, but this one is the same one we saw. Is his building? I'm a little bit confused. Let me see if no, it's the same building. I'm surprised. I have to double check this. Anyway, it's the same building that we saw where he lived. And he's the only one which has this owl. I think it's an owl. Just to discreetly or not so discreetly show that someone who matters lives there. This is actually the third building that he built in Paris, an apartment building, and they are not. You cannot call them masterpieces, but they are inserted in the urban fabric of Paris. Now I'm approaching the end of the presentation. I show a few other works by him just with one image, and then I'll end with a short grouping of, I would say, very moving gargoyles that he did. So this is a castle that he built from his own plans. It's not a restoration. Chateau Jacques-Son, Chalon, Champagne. A big villa. I wouldn't really call it a castle, but anyway, it doesn't really matter how we call it. This was done after, he built it from zero, so to speak. Now, restoration, we already talked about Sainte-Chapelle in Paris, but we see now this picture from the interior. I think it's quite, quite impressive. This is part of Sainte-Chapelle in Paris, and he did it. This material I took from a site that shows 12 works by VIOLLET LE DUC, some of them constructions and the others restorations. Well, restoration is a construction too. So again, Église Saint-Martin, this church was built by him without having an existing building there before. I don't know. It's a church. It's a church, obviously. Restoration again, and in this place, Auxois on Côte d'Or. What exactly he did here, I do not know. Maybe these newer parts, I don't know. Anyway, but interesting town around it. I love these old medieval towns, and France does have a number of them that are quite beautiful. Another construction, Château de la Flachère à Saint-Véran. I guess is this one, which he built, was not a restoration, was a construction. I don't know if he did these as well. I don't know. Now another restoration, another castle, and the castle it is indeed. Maybe he worked on this facade. It looks newer than what is happening here. This was a restoration again, and another construction, another castle. These privileged places for privileged people, they turn me off a little bit, but they are probably splendid there in the natural surroundings on top of a hill or whatever. Another restoration, and it's this chateau, and another construction. So this was done, as I said, from ground zero up, and another restoration. You can see here actually the layers of you know, work done during different times. Kind of interesting, hybrid and impure, and I don't know where he worked. Maybe he worked here. It's possible. Anyway, La Cathédrale de Mirepoix on Ariège. This also restoration. As you can see, France has many churches, cathedrals, you know, buildings we didn't hear of, I didn't hear of, and yet they are important, they are significant. And I end the presentation on VIOLLET LE DUC, and he deserves, for those of you who are interested, he deserves further study. Just open up the web, and you can discover many other things about this important architect of the 19th century. But I chose to end with the gargoyles because they move me, because they are very expressive, and because they represent, they are his original contributions to the art of the cathedral, if I can say so, at Notre Dame. Look at this. You know, and you wonder, why would the architect spend his creative energy to imagine something like this, you know, so grotesque? I'm not sure I can give an answer. You know, maybe in this way he expressed a side of his psychology, of his soul. He understood that there are dark forces in life and within himself as well. But I think a creative artist, a creative architect understands the dualities of life, that there isn't just light, there is also shadow. There isn't just joy, there is also sadness. There isn't just comedy and laughter, but there is also tragedy. And, you know, these monsters, you know, I mean, look at the expression of the head. You know, what is it saying? You know, it's very possible he had his own disappointments in life. It's very possible he had moments of pessimism or even despair. It's possible. But somehow these inventions of VIOLLET LE DUC, in my opinion, adorn La Cathédrale de Notre Dame, the Cathedral of Notre Dame, in a convincing way. I don't feel that they are, I mean, they are so-called strange, but I personally welcome them there on the roof or on the edges of the higher parts of the cathedral. He was obviously also a philosopher, a contemplative man, a poet, you know, and he needed to say something that probably a more conventional spirit would not have thought of. Look at these strange animals, you know. Is this an animal with two bodies? I mean, with two heads? Or no, maybe there are two, but anyway, look at them, you know, even this one, you know, what are they doing here? These grotesque animals, they are at Notre Dame, but what are they doing there on this so-called balcony of the, you know, the edge of the, you know, very close to the roof? What are they doing? What is their symbolism? Why did he make them? Drawings of gargoyles that he of course, he was inspired by the Gothic. During the Gothic times, this was done frequently. All kinds of strange heads and animals and bodies populated here and there the stoneworks of the Gothic cathedral. You wonder, why did the Gothic man need to do this? Why is it that we, the moderns, have no interest whatsoever in this? Although an architect like Peter Eisenman, he talked about grotesque, meaning he played with the words text and grotesque, and creating grotesque text, grotesque, because it has been said that the sublime what is sublime contains, it's not just about beauty, it's more than just a beauty. It incorporates the dark, so to speak, the beast. And here are, in the house of God, the beasts are present, facing not the cathedral, but facing away from the cathedral, looking at the city. I find them very enticing and interesting, and I'm not sure I have a viable explanation. I'm sure there are books and articles about them, but I think they could be the subject of meditation, of reflection, and I don't think thinking about them is a loss of time. For example, one could write an essay called The Gargoyle and Eiffel Tower, or the Eiffel Tower and the Gargoyle. You know, this dialogue between an intervention by small dimensions by Viollet le Duc and what l'ingénieur Eiffel built for the outrage of the Parisians of his time. I think it's possible. I'm not sure if he didn't actually. I'm not sure. The photography was invented in the 19th century. I saw this picture connected with his name. In fact, it was mentioned as a photography made by Viollet le Duc, but I think wrongly. I don't think he photographed it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He brought these strange figures here, protecting perhaps the cathedral in some way, in some strange way, but they look, you know, rather ominous. And here he is, the architect. We already saw a picture of him. And I end the presentation with his spire, which came down when the fire happened. But I'm sure, I hope the present will find creative resources to bring it back to life in some form. So thank you for your presence.